Trust is a luxury you can't afford when you're desperate. I learned that lesson in a place so remote, Google Maps gave up trying to pronounce it. When you're 58 years old and everything you thought you knew about paperwork, love, and survival gets stripped away in a single conversation with an immigration officer who speaks 3 words of English, you realize how small you really are. I came here thinking I was rescuing someone. Turns out I was the one who needed saving, from my own stupidity, my own loneliness, and a woman who understood exactly how much a scared old man would pay to feel needed again. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our viewers who's still fighting his case from somewhere in the Philippines. I can still picture that Manila coffee shop where it all started 6 months ago. The air conditioning was broken, and sweat was dripping down my back while Soledad sat across from me, cool as ice, stirring her iced coffee with that confident smile I'd grown to trust. "Bruce, don't worry about your visa," she said, her English perfect and reassuring. "My cousin works in immigration. We can handle everything from my province. It's cheaper there, and nobody asks too many questions." I should have asked why nobody asks questions. I should have asked a lot of things. But when you're 58, divorced, and your ex-wife just took half of everything you worked 30 years to build, you don't ask questions when a beautiful 26-year-old woman offers to solve your problems. You just nod and reach for your wallet. "How long will it take?" I asked, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't betting my entire retirement fund on this conversation. "Maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3, she said, waving her hand like time was just a minor detail. "Philippine government is slow, but my cousin can speed things up. You just need to trust me, okay?" Trust? That word should have been a red flag the size of Texas. But I was lonely, I was desperate, and I was tired of being nobody special in a country that had forgotten I existed. In the Philippines, I was exotic. I was the American with money and stories and a different perspective on everything. I was somebody again. "What about the cost?" I asked. "Oh, maybe 5,000 pesos for processing." "Nothing expensive. You have more money than most Filipinos make in a year, right?" She laughed, but there was something calculating in her eyes that I chose to ignore. I had met Soledad 3 months earlier, on one of those dating sites where lonely Western men go to find meaning in their empty lives. She was studying nursing, she said. Her family was poor but proud. She needed help with school fees, and I needed someone to need me. It seemed like a fair trade at the time. The video calls were sweet. She'd show me her small room, her textbooks, her dreams of becoming a nurse and helping people. I sent money for tuition, for her mother's medicine, for her brother's school supplies. It felt good to be needed again, to be someone's hero instead of someone's disappointment. "Why can't we handle the visa here in Manila?" I asked, though I was already convinced. I just wanted to hear her reasoning again. Too many foreigners here. Too many complications. In my province, my family knows everyone. The mayor, the immigration officer, the police chief. We can make things happen quietly, efficiently. Plus, you can meet my family. See the real Philippines, not just this crazy city. The real Philippines. That phrase should have terrified me, but I was already picturing myself as the generous American boyfriend, welcomed into a simple Filipino family, appreciated for my wisdom and my wallet. I imagined teaching English to local kids, maybe helping with community projects, becoming part of something bigger than my empty apartment back in Ohio. "When do we leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning. Early bus. Bring enough money for the processing, and maybe some extra for my family. They're very excited to meet you." I withdrew $8,000 from my account that night. It seemed reasonable at the time. A visa extension, some gifts for the family, a little cushion for unexpected expenses. I was going to be there for 2 weeks, maybe 3. How expensive could it be? The bus ride to Soledad's province was 12 hours of my life I'll never get back. We left Manila at 6 in the morning, and by noon I was already questioning my judgment. The air conditioning died somewhere around hour 4, and the heat was suffocating. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching Soledad transform from the chatty, affectionate woman I thought I knew into someone cold and distant. "You're very quiet," I said, trying to start a conversation as we bumped along a road that seemed to get worse with every mile. "I'm thinking," she replied, not looking up from her phone. She'd been texting constantly since we left Manila, on a phone I'd never seen before. When I asked about it, She said it was her province phone for better signal. That should have been red flag number 2. By hour 8, there were no more English signs. By hour 10, there were no more signs at all, just hand-painted markers pointing toward villages, with names I couldn't pronounce. The other passengers were staring at me openly now, not with curiosity, but with something that felt like pity. An old woman in the seat behind us said something to Soledad in rapid Tagalog, and they both looked at me and laughed. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said you looked tired. Maybe you should sleep." But I couldn't sleep. Something in my gut was telling me that this wasn't right, that I was heading towards something I wasn't prepared for. The landscape outside was beautiful but alien. Rice fields stretching to the horizon, water buffalo standing motionless in flooded paddies, mountains shrouded in clouds that looked like they were hiding secrets. "How much further?" I asked as the sun began to set. "Not far now. Maybe 1 hour." But it was 3 more hours before we finally stopped in what Soledad called her town, though it looked more like a collection of concrete buildings scattered along a dirt road. There were no streetlights, no traffic signals, no signs of modern infrastructure. Just a few small stores with corrugated metal roofs and a single gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. "Welcome to my home," Soledad said, but her voice was flat, businesslike. Gone was the warmth I'd grown accustomed to during our video calls. A motorcycle taxi was waiting for us, and we rode through dark, narrow streets for another 20 minutes before stopping in front of a small concrete house with a tin roof and bars on all the windows. Dogs were barking somewhere in the distance, and I could hear voices speaking in a dialect I didn't recognize. "Here we are," Soledad said, climbing off the motorcycle. "Come, meet my family." The family was waiting for us in the small living room, sitting on plastic chairs around a table covered with a vinyl tablecloth. There was Rosa, Soledad's mother, a small woman in her 50s with tired eyes and hands that spoke of decades of hard work. Miguel, her teenage brother, skinny and shy, wearing a basketball jersey with a hole in the shoulder. And Ernesto, the grandfather, 80-something years old with skin like leather and eyes that had seen too much. "Welcome, Bruce," Rosa said in careful English. "We are happy you are here." But they didn't look surprised. They looked like they'd been expecting me for weeks, like this was just another day at the office. Ernesto nodded at me and said something in Tagalog that made Miguel giggle. "What did he say?" I asked Soledad. "He said you look like a strong man. He fought the Japanese in World War II. He respects strong men." I shook hands with everyone, trying to be the gracious guest, but something felt rehearsed about the whole scene. Like they'd done this before. "Where will I be staying?" I asked. Soledad led me to a small room at the back of the house. It had a single window with bars, a mattress on the floor and a plastic chair. No air conditioning, no fan, just humid air that felt like breathing through a wet towel. "It's simple but clean," she said. "Tomorrow we start working on your visa. Tonight you rest, but I couldn't rest." The mattress was thin and uncomfortable. The heat was oppressive, and every sound outside, the barking dogs, the roosters, the voices speaking in languages I couldn't understand, reminded me how far I was from anything familiar. I lay there in the dark, sweating and wondering what I'd gotten myself into. This wasn't the adventure I'd imagined. This wasn't the warm family welcome I'd been promised. This felt like something else entirely, something I didn't have a name for yet. Around midnight, I heard Soledad talking to her family in the next room. Their voices were low but urgent, and I caught my name several times. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was businesslike, practical. They were discussing me like I was a problem to be solved, or a resource to be managed. That's when I started to understand that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the hero in this story. Maybe I was something else entirely. The waiting began the next morning and stretched into days, then weeks. Every day, Soledad would leave early, claiming she was going to the government office to work on my visa paperwork. She'd return in the evening with the same story. "They need more documents. The process is slow. My cousin is working on it, but you have to be patient." "What kind of documents?" I'd ask. "Birth certificate, bank statements, proof of income." Normal things, but they have to be translated, notarized, approved by different departments. Philippine bureaucracy is very complicated. "Can I come with you? Maybe I can speed things up." No. Better if I handle it. You don't understand how things work here. If you come, They might think you're trying to bribe someone. Could make problems. So I waited. And while I waited, the expenses started piling up. First, it was the processing fee, 5,000 pesos, just like she'd promised. Then it was an expedite fee, another 3,000 pesos to move my application to the front of the line. Then came the translation fee, the notarization fee, the authentication fee. Each one seemed reasonable on its own, but together they were bleeding me dry. How much more is this going to cost? I asked after 2 weeks of fees. Not much more. Maybe 5,000 pesos. 10,000 maximum. These things cost money, Bruce. If you want it done right, you have to pay the right people. But it wasn't just the visa fees. Somehow I'd become responsible for the family's daily expenses. Groceries, electricity, water, Miguel's school supplies, Rosa's medicine. When I questioned it, Soledad would get defensive. My family is taking care of you, feeding you, giving you a place to sleep. Of course you should help with expenses. That's normal, right? When someone stays in your house for free, they contribute something. The logic was sound, but the amounts kept growing. What started as a few hundred pesos for groceries became 1,000 pesos a day for household expenses. When I tried to budget or set limits, Soledad would remind me how much money I had compared to her family. You make more money in 1 month than my family makes in 1 year. A few thousand pesos is nothing to you, but it's everything to us. I thought you understood that. I thought you cared about helping people. The guilt was suffocating. Here I was, a rich American complaining about money while staying with a family that had almost nothing. How could I be so selfish? How could I question their need for help when I had so much more than they did? But the real problem wasn't the money. The real problem was that I had no way to verify anything Soledad was telling me. There was no internet in the house, no landline phone, no way to contact the outside world except through Soledad's phone, which she guarded jealously. The nearest town was 2 hours away by motorcycle, and I couldn't drive one even if they'd let me borrow it. When can I call my family back home? I asked one evening. Maybe next week. When we go to town for supplies, you can use the phone at the store. But next week became the week after, and the week after became the month after. There was always a reason why we couldn't go to town. The motorcycle was broken. The weather was bad. The roads were impassable. Soledad was too busy with my visa paperwork to make the trip. I was completely dependent on her for everything: communication, transportation, information, even basic necessities. If I wanted to buy something, she had to buy it for me. If I wanted to go somewhere, she had to take me. If I wanted to know what was happening with my visa, I had to trust her word. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the family's attitude toward me began to change. They were still polite, still friendly, but there was a subtle shift. They stopped treating me like a guest and started treating me like a permanent fixture. Rosa would give me chores to do around the house. Miguel would ask me for money for school trips and new clothes. Ernesto would sit me down for long, incomprehensible conversations that Soledad would translate selectively. "What is he saying?" I'd ask. "He's telling you about the war, about how Americans helped the Philippines fight the Japanese. He says you're a good man like the American soldiers." But I could see in Ernesto's eyes that he was saying something else entirely, something about obligation and debt and the price of hospitality. 3 weeks in, I started having panic attacks. They'd hit me in the middle of the night, when the reality of my situation would crash down on me like a weight. I was thousands of miles from home, in a place where no one spoke my language, with no legal status, no way to communicate with the outside world, and dwindling savings. If something happened to me here, if I got sick, if I had an accident, if I just disappeared, no one would know where to look for me. "I need to call the American embassy," I told Soledad during one of these attacks. "Why? Is there a problem?" "I just need to let someone know where I am. My family is probably worried." "Don't worry. As soon as your visa is approved, you can call anyone you want. But right now it might look suspicious if you contact the embassy. They might think you're having problems with your application. Could delay everything." Everything she said sounded reasonable, but everything felt wrong. I was trapped in a web of reasonable-sounding explanations that kept me isolated and dependent. Every question I asked had an answer that made me sound paranoid or ungrateful. Every concern I raised was dismissed as unnecessary worry or cultural misunderstanding. But the worst part was that I was starting to suspect that maybe, just maybe, there was no visa application at all. The truth came out during an argument about money. It was my 5th week in the province, and I'd just given Soledad another 5,000 pesos for what she called a final processing fee. But when she came home that evening, she was carrying shopping bags full of new clothes and cosmetics. "I thought that money was for visa fees," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "It was, but there was some left over, so I bought a few things for myself. I've been working very hard on your case. I deserve something nice, don't you think?" "How much was left over?" "I don't remember exactly. Maybe 2,000 pesos. Soledad, I gave you 5,000 pesos this morning. If you spent 2,000 on clothes, what happened to the other 3,000? She got defensive immediately. "Why are you questioning me? Don't you trust me? I've been running around all day, dealing with corrupt government officials trying to fix your problems. And this is how you thank me. I just want to understand where my money is going." "Your money? Your money? You think because you have money you can control everything? This is not America, Bruce. Here, people help each other. Here, people share what they have." The argument escalated quickly. Voices were raised, accusations were made, and finally, in a moment of anger, Soledad said something she probably hadn't meant to say. "You want to know where your money is going? It's going to feed my family. It's going to pay Miguel's school fees. It's going to buy Rosa's medicine. Your visa application. There is no visa application. There never was." The silence that followed was deafening. So I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say she was just angry and didn't mean it. But she didn't take it back. Instead, she doubled down. "You think my cousin works in immigration? My cousin works in a rice field. You think I've been going to government offices every day? I've been going to the market, buying food for my family with your money. You want to know the truth? The truth is that you're an overstaying foreigner in a place where nobody speaks English, nobody knows you exist, and nobody cares what happens to you." My legs felt weak. I sat down on the plastic chair, trying to process what she'd just told me. "So my visa expired 3 weeks ago. You're here illegally now. And if you try to leave, if you try to go back to Manila without my help, I'll call immigration myself. I'll tell them there's an illegal American in our province. They'll arrest you, deport you, and ban you from ever coming back to the Philippines. You can't do that, can't I? You think the immigration officer in the next town speaks English? You think he's going to believe your story over mine? You think he's going to care about some old American man who can't even pronounce the name of the province he's in?" She was right, and we both knew it. I was completely at her mercy. I needed her to get out of this mess, but she had no incentive to help me leave. As long as I was stuck here, I was a source of income for her family. The moment I left, that income disappeared. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "I want you to stop asking stupid questions about money. I want you to accept that you're part of this family now, and families take care of each other. You help us, we help you. You try to run away, you create problems for everyone." That night I lay on my mattress, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how I'd ended up in this situation. I'd come to the Philippines looking for purpose, for connection, for a new start. Instead, I'd found myself trapped in a web of lies and manipulation, held captive not by chains, but by my own desperation and naivety. I thought about my ex-wife back in Ohio, probably sitting in the house we used to share, wondering where I'd disappeared to. I thought about my retirement account, slowly draining away in 1,000-peso increments. I thought about the visa that never existed, and the cousin who worked in rice fields instead of immigration offices. But mostly I thought about how perfectly Soledad had played me. She'd identified exactly what I needed: to feel needed, to feel important, to feel like I was saving someone. And she'd used those needs against me. She'd turned my desire to help into a weapon that was now pointed at my own throat. The next morning I made a decision. I had to find a way to contact the outside world, to get help, to escape this trap before it consumed what was left of my savings and my sanity. But first I had to understand exactly how deep I was in this hole. I used the neighbor's phone while Soledad was out, pretending to be at the government office that didn't exist. I called the U.S. Embassy in Manila, and what I learned made my situation even worse than I'd imagined. "Sir, overstaying your visa in the Philippines is a serious matter," the embassy official explained. "The penalties can be quite severe, especially if you've been overstaying for more than a month. You're looking at significant fines, possible detention, and a lengthy legal process. How long does it usually take to resolve? With proper legal representation, maybe 3 to 6 months. Without it, could be a year or more. And that's assuming you can get to Manila and have the resources to hire an attorney. What if I can't afford an attorney? Then you're looking at indefinite detention until someone can post bail or the courts decide your case. Sir, where exactly are you located right now? I told him the name of the province, or at least my best attempt at pronouncing it. Sir, that's a very remote area. If you're having legal troubles there, it could be very difficult to get help. Do you have local contacts who can assist you? Local contacts. The irony wasn't lost on me. My only local contact was the person who'd gotten me into this mess in the first place. What should I do? First, don't make your situation worse by trying to travel without proper documentation. Second, consider hiring a Manila-based attorney who specializes in immigration cases. Third, be prepared for a lengthy and expensive process. Lengthy and expensive. Those words echoed in my head as I hung up the phone. I was trapped in a catch-22 that Soledad had engineered perfectly. I needed her help to resolve my legal status, but helping me resolve my legal status was the last thing she wanted to do. When she returned that evening, I was waiting for her with a proposal. I know about the visa, I said. I know there's no application, no cousin in immigration, no government office. I know I'm here illegally, and I know you're the only one who can help me fix this. She didn't deny it. She just sat down across from me and waited for me to continue. I'm willing to pay you to help me get legal status. Really pay you, not just for fake processing fees. But I need to know exactly what it's going to cost and exactly how long it's going to take. How much are you willing to pay? $20,000 US dollars, but only if you come with me to Manila and help me resolve this properly. Her eyes lit up at the mention of $20,000. That was more money than her family would see in 5 years. $20,000. $20,000. But there are conditions. First, we go to Manila together, and you help me get proper legal status. Second, you help me understand exactly what I need to do to stay legal going forward. Third, once this is resolved, you leave me alone. No more family expenses, no more emergency fees, no more anything. She was quiet for a long time, calculating. I could see her weighing the guaranteed $20,000 against the possibility of stringing me along indefinitely for smaller amounts. $30,000, she said finally. $25,000. That's my final offer. Okay, $25,000. But half now, half when your visa is approved. No. $5,000 now, $20,000 when my visa is approved. $10,000 now. Fine. $10,000 now. But Soledad, if you try to scam me again, if you disappear with the money or try to string this out longer than necessary, I'll make sure every expat forum in the Philippines knows your name and your picture. I'll make sure no other lonely old foreigner ever falls for your scam. She agreed, though I could see in her eyes that she was already planning how to get more money out of me once we got to Manila. The trip to Manila was a nightmare of bureaucracy, corruption, and humiliation. My overstay penalties alone were more than $8,000. Then there were the legal fees, the processing fees, the expedite fees, and the various bribes that had to be paid to move things along. Soledad stayed with me through every appointment, translating selectively and controlling the narrative. What did the officer say? I'd ask after a particularly heated exchange in Tagalog. He said, your case is complicated. You overstayed for a long time, so there are extra penalties. But he can help us if we pay the expedite fee. How much? $2,000. $2,000 just to expedite the paperwork. Bruce, you want this fixed quickly or you want to sit in detention for 6 months while they process your case slowly? Every conversation was a variation of this same theme. Pay more money or suffer worse consequences. And I had no choice but to trust Soledad's translation because she was my only link to the system that held my fate in its hands. After 3 weeks in Manila, bouncing between government offices and legal clinics, I finally received a temporary legal status that would allow me to stay in the Philippines while pursuing permanent residency. The process had cost me more than $30,000, far more than the $25,000 I'd agreed to pay Soledad. You said $25,000, I reminded her as we tallied up the expenses. That was just for my help. The government fees and penalties are separate. You think I control how much the Philippine government charges for visa violations? She was right, technically. But I suspected that many of the government fees had ended up in her pocket, or the pockets of officials who were in on the scam. I had no way to verify what was legitimate and what was theft, because I couldn't read the receipts, and I couldn't communicate with the officials directly. By the time we returned to the province, I was legally present in the Philippines but financially devastated. My retirement savings were nearly gone, my credit cards were maxed out, and I had no immediate way to replace the income I'd lost. But the worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was that I'd won the right to stay in a country where I no longer wanted to be, with a woman who saw me only as a source of income. I was legally free but practically trapped. Back in the province, the dynamics of our relationship became even more explicit. Soledad no longer pretended that we were boyfriend and girlfriend. We were business partners now, and she was the senior partner. "You can stay here as long as you want," she told me, "but you pay your share of expenses. Miguel needs money for college, Rosa needs money for her diabetes medicine, the house needs repairs. You're part of the family now, so you contribute like family. How much are we talking about? Maybe $1,000 a month. For room, food, utilities, family support, very reasonable for an American. $1,000 a month in a place where the average family income was less than $300 a month. It was extortion, but it was legal extortion. I was free to leave at any time. But leaving meant abandoning the money I'd already invested and starting over somewhere else with no savings and no support system. So I stayed, and slowly, I began to understand the ecosystem I'd become part of. I wasn't the only foreign man in the province supporting a Filipino family. There was Hans, a German retiree who'd been there for 5 years, paying for his girlfriend's extended family's needs. There was Ken, an Australian who'd married a local woman and now funded everything from her siblings' education to her parents' medical care. We'd nod to each other in the market sometimes, but we never talked about our situations. There was an unspoken understanding that we were all trapped in variations of the same web, and discussing it wouldn't change anything. The community accepted us as the foreigners who take care of families. We weren't quite residents and we weren't quite visitors. We were resources, human ATMs who provided financial stability in exchange for a place to belong. I found small pleasures where I could. I started teaching English to local children, which gave me a sense of purpose. I helped with community projects, which gave me something to do with my time. I learned enough Tagalog to handle basic conversations, which gave me a tiny bit of independence. But every night, I'd lie on my mattress and wonder how I'd ended up here. How a man who'd worked for 30 years, who'd built a life and a marriage and a future, could end up trapped in a place whose name he still couldn't pronounce correctly. Financially supporting people who saw him as a means to an end, rather than a human being. The answer, I realized, was loneliness. Loneliness had made me vulnerable to Soledad's manipulation. Loneliness had made me ignore the red flags and rationalize the inconsistencies. Loneliness had made me so desperate to be needed that I'd ignored the difference between being needed and being used. Now, 6 months later, I've found a different kind of peace. Not happiness exactly, but acceptance. I understand the rules of this place now. I understand my role in this ecosystem. I understand the price I pay for belonging somewhere, even if that belonging comes with chains. I'm not the naive American who thought he was rescuing a young Filipino woman anymore. But I'm also not the bitter divorced man who fled Ohio in search of meaning. I'm something in between, a man who learned too late that sometimes the thing you're running toward is just another version of the thing you're running from. The difference is that now I know the price. Now I know what I'm buying with my money and my freedom. And maybe in its own strange way that's worth something too. Maybe knowing the real cost of belonging somewhere is better than the illusion of belonging nowhere at all. Sometimes late at night when the roosters are quiet and the dogs have stopped barking, I think about calling my ex-wife. I think about telling her where I am, what happened to me, why I disappeared. But then I remember that she's probably moved on, probably found someone who can give her the stability and predictability I never could. And I think about Miguel, who's starting college next year because of the money I send, and Rosa, who can afford her diabetes medicine because I pay for it. And even Soledad, who's built a small business selling cosmetics with the profit margins she skims from my monthly contributions. I'm not proud of how I got here. I'm not proud of the choices I made or the signs I ignored. But I'm not entirely ashamed either, because sometimes being useful is enough. Sometimes being needed, even if it's only for your money, is better than not being needed at all. The sun sets early in the province, and the nights are long and filled with sounds I'm still learning to identify. Tomorrow, Miguel will ask me for money for a school trip. Rosa will need refills for her medicine. Soledad will find some new emergency that requires my financial intervention. And I'll pay because that's my role here. Not because I'm generous or kind or noble, but because I've learned that belonging somewhere always costs something. The only question is whether you're willing to pay the price with your eyes open or closed. I chose to open my eyes. It doesn't make me free, but it makes me honest. And in a place where honesty is rarer than money, maybe that's worth something too.